Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jules Monroe, and this week I have a story written by my co-author and best friend. This week's story is The Wolf Who Saved Christmas. It is part of an ongoing series where Baxter, the main character, and the wolf finds himself rescuing holidays. This story is the start of a longer series that is a super slow burn and super sweet romance. I don't have much else to say on it, except for there is a flaw when the narrator says the title. It says WHO instead of who, and I don't know why, but it didn't alert me to that particular flaw before I cut it. So it's there. I'm sorry. It is what it is. Otherwise, please enjoy it, and I will see you guys in the next one.
The Wolf WHO Saved Christmas. The Wolf Who Saved Series Book 1. Chloe Zane. Chapter 1. Hey Bax. A word, man. Baxter Lawson finished tightening the last screw holding the lawnmower engine to the frame before he turned his attention to his packmate and employee. Clint settled on the overturned milk crate next to him. Got a few? Always. Hand me that wrench. Baxter motioned behind Clint. What's up? Can take off a few hours early. I have to run into Pensacola and visit the kids in the pediatric ward to give out candy for Christmas. Baxter fought the desire to roll his eyes at the mention of the upcoming holiday. How the hell did you even get involved in that? You're about as far from Santa as any one person can get. Clint grinned wickedly. Funny story. I was dating this guy, and he had this thing for volunteering. They needed a Santa Claus one year, and I got shoved into the suit. When I visited all the kids in the hospital and saw their faces, I don't know man, something just clicked. It's very rewarding. Baxter's eyebrow lifted. And sex as Santa was pretty rewarding too. Aha. Baxter held up a hand before Clint had the chance to elaborate. Never mind. There are certain things I do not want to know. Are you even still seeing the guy? Nah, that ended a while back. But this stuck. It's meaningful. It's about something bigger than me. Baxter thought life having any sort of meaning like that was far overrated. Life was what it was for him. It had never been easy. Not for him, not for any of his pack. What meaning was there to find in constant misery? It wasn't until Hild Brentworth took them in and gave them structure and stability that his life changed. So if Baxter had any meaning for his life, it was to give back to her. But he wouldn't begrudge his fellow wolves the opportunity to find it for themselves. He looked around the shop. Sure. We're quiet for the moment and I can spare you. Thanks, man. What are you doing for Christmas Eve? Got anything special planned? Nah. Not much for holidays. I figured I'd watch a game or something. Find a movie that isn't some sappy romance saves Christmas and hunker down for the night. Head to Hild's for Christmas lunch tomorrow. That's about it. Good luck finding a non-sappy Christmas movie. The holidays are all about love, man, Clint said. Baxter grunted. You better get going if you're going. Thanks. I'm throwing a small get-together at my trailer later, Clint said as he rose to his feet. I promise no kids. Just the guys, beer, take a page from your playbook and crank up Netflix. Maybe even head to the beach for a bonfire. If you want something to do. Baxter waved him off. Nah. I have to stop by Aunt Hilde's before I go home, and who knows how long that will last. You were always her favorite. Gimme a break. Only because I was the tallest kid who could reach the top shelf. At least you didn't have to crawl under the house to wrap pipes, Clint said with a shudder. Is she settled into her new house okay? Yeah. That's why I'm stopping by at lunch to see if there's anything needs doing. Make sure to go by and see her. She misses all her boys. We'll be there tomorrow. Clint clapped Baxter on the shoulder and pushed to his feet. I'm out. Thanks again. He gave a small wave and left the shop. Baxter glanced at his watch. He was almost done with this lawnmower, and there were only a few odds and ends left to repair. "Ricky, what are you working on?" The young wolf peeked out from the parts room. "Just looking for the new order of number 4 screws." "Seen them?" "On the desk in the office." "Come here." Ricky trotted over to where Baxter finished up the mower and wiped down his tools. "Get this loaded on Ernie Springer's trailer, then call to tell him it's done. The invoice is on the desk. When Jared gets back from lunch, tell him Mrs. Davis's chainsaw needs repairing next. All that is on the workbench over there." Baxter flapped his rag in the direction of where the jobs were lined up. "Xander will be here to lock up tonight. Think you can hold down the fort until he gets here?" "Sure, Bax." Ricky's face lit up. He was still so enthusiastic about life, even after he was abandoned when he was small. Just like his whole pack had been left at the mercy of the system, who didn't want lichen-infected children. Hild Brentworth was their savior. All of them. She stepped up to the plate when no one else would, and helped to give newly infected kids a chance at a normal life. As normal as any lichen could hope to have. "All right," Baxter said, pulling out his phone. 3 messages from Aunt Hilde. "Need anything while I'm out?" "I got it, boss." Ricky gave him a goofy salute. "Text if you need anything." "If I don't see you until tomorrow, have a good Christmas Eve, Bax," Ricky said after him. With a grunt, Baxter grabbed the keys to his truck and headed off on his errands. Baxter waited patiently for the security gate to open. That was new. A glossy black wrought iron gate swung open on silent hinges. That was the biggest giveaway, it was new. His foster mother recently retired and wanted to move closer to the coast. She settled on a house in a sleepy, gated retirement-type community to enjoy her twilight years. It was well-deserved. After decades of caring for abandoned and orphaned children infected with the lichen virus, she'd earned her retirement. Baxter and the other now-grown kids she took care of through the years pooled their money to see that she lived in comfort. Most had moved on with their lives. Those few, like Baxter, decided to stay very close to her, so they had moved with her to Miltonville. Baxter, being the alpha of their makeshift pack, started a small engine repair shop to give them a way to make a living. The most important thing had been to remain near the woman who had given of herself for their sake. He pulled through and watched as it closed in the rearview mirror. The gate was mostly for show. It wouldn't be all that effective in keeping the criminal element out, especially when it only worked half the time. It was effective in giving the residents a sense of security. Most of the people who lived at the Twin Pines estates worked in nearby Pensacola and made the commute so they could feel like they were rural. As if living in a neighborhood with a security gate which worked only half the time could be counted as rural. People were odd like that. They had the money, so they could do what they wanted. At least the neighborhood was quiet. And living in the balmy South, winters were mild, which was the drawing point for those elderly folks looking to retire and not have their arthritis aggravated by the bitter cold. The mosquitoes, on the other hand. All in all, from what Baxter knew of the people in the neighborhood, they were good folks. They looked after each other and included Hild in their circle, and that was all that Baxter cared about. He pulled up into her driveway and noticed that the vacant house next door didn't appear to be vacant anymore. A Chevy Suburban sat at the bottom of the drive, pulled away from the garage to allow access. The garage door was open, and a riding lawnmower sat with the engine cover propped up and several tools scattered about on the ground. With a smirk, he killed the engine and grabbed a bag of things he'd picked up for Hild. How long would it be before that lawnmower ended up in his shop? While not all city folk were hopeless with mechanical things, most who had money tended to think they could do it, only to fuck it up beyond their ability, give up, and finally pay someone. That was how Baxter made his money. Fixing other people's screw-ups. Now most of his business came from Twin Pines since Hild was there to talk him up. Halfway up the walk to Aunt Hilde's door, the new neighbor strolled out of the garage. Only out of curiosity, Baxter turned to see who it was, expecting to see some elderly man with a slight paunch and baggy shorts showing off white spindly legs, ill-advisedly not wearing a t-shirt. Expectation was not reality. The tall man who strolled out, looking at several wrenches in his hands as he headed for his mower, was none of those things. He was shirtless, which Baxter considered a blessing because the man was incredible to behold. Was it possible for one human being to be that good-looking? Apparently so. He did have the baggy shorts, but instead of hanging from a soft body, the man was all slim muscles and flat plains. With his shorts slung low on his hips, if he wasn't a swimmer in college, then the man certainly missed his chance. Judging by the way he wore his glasses, certainly a kink of Baxter's, he must be in technical work. Another kink got a check mark. Just hitting all those kinks, Mr. Neighbor. Merry Christmas, Baxter. Too busy gawking at the very nice view living next door to Hild, Baxter wasn't watching where he was walking. His boot caught one of the clumps of monkey grass lining the sidewalk, and it sent him pitching forward. It was a fast dance to keep his balance and not face-plant into Hild's hydrangeas. When he caught his balance, he looked up to see the neighbor watching him. Baxter smiled and nodded. He received one in return that made his heart beat a little faster, although he was sure that was more from recovering his footing than the way the man's smile lit up his whole face. Careful of the lariopes, Baxter, Hild called from the front door. Sorry, Aunt Hilde. Baxter glanced once more to see the lanky man flipping through the instruction manual before he greeted the sweet lady waiting for him on the porch. How are you? I brought the buttermilk, he said, waving the bag at her. Wonderful. Pancakes for Christmas Day breakfast. She waved him in, and Baxter was a little sad he could no longer see the man. He followed her into the kitchen. I see you got a new neighbor. From down the hall there was a chirp. Hild looked up from putting the buttermilk into the fridge. Yes. Nice young man. He owns his own business. It just opened down on Beecher, where the old physical therapy office was. Coffee, darling? Yes, ma'am. Baxter shrugged his jacket off and draped it over a chair in the living room before taking a seat at her dining table. How long has he lived there? Chirp. He's been there a few months now. I never saw him before, Baxter mused. Probably because you usually come for visits when he's at work. After a few moments, she joined him with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She sat across from him and sipped at her coffee. Beneath the sugar bowl was a small list. I hope you have some time today. I have a list of things I need to do. He slid the list in front of him to look it over. Chirp. Sure enough, one of the items was to replace the battery in the hall smoke detector. How long has it been chirping? Baxter took a sip, then went to the drawer where she kept her odds and ends to dig for the batteries. Goodness, a few days. It's driving me nuts. Chirp. Aunt Hilde, Baxter said in exasperation, you can't let shit. Language, Baxter. Stuff go for that long. What if a fire had started? Then I imagine it would have chirped a lot faster. Chirp. Do you have any 9 volts? If it's not in the drawer, I suppose I don't. Baxter closed the drawer and pulled out his wallet. He had enough cash to run down to Greenlee's. I'll run out. Why don't you ask Logan? Chirp. Who? Logan. My neighbor. Hild's hand gestured vaguely next door. Baxter was struck with a sudden realization. You sly old woman. I have no idea what you're talking about. She sipped primly at her mug. But if you must go to Greenlee's, then by all means do so. The way her eyes narrowed gave everything away. Aha. All right, we'll do this your way. I'll go ask if he has a battery. I guess it's better than asking for a cup of sugar. You do that. Baxter was at the front door when she called from the kitchen. Why don't you invite Logan for lunch? I've made plenty. Manipulative old woman. Chirp. Chapter 2. Once back outside, Baxter smoothed the hand through his hair. Should he have ducked into the bathroom to run a brush through it? Not that he was primping. Baxter knew this was cunningly orchestrated. He grew up in the woman's home, he knew how she operated. What she couldn't do directly, she was shameless enough to manipulate things to suit her. It was never malicious. Oddly enough, it was never for her own edification either. It was almost always for someone else's benefit. All that was a nice way to say Hild set him up. He was certain if he pressed this neighbor for details, he'd find the man had been at work for the past few days and this was his day off. Coincidental with the very day that Hild insisted Baxter come over to do chores. With Hild, that was a distinct possibility. She did nothing by happenstance. Baxter towed at the monkey grass to make sure he didn't kick it up before strolling over to Logan, who was kneeling on the ground, peering in at the engine. "Hey," Baxter said. "Everything okay?" Logan straightened and rocked to settle on his heels so he could twist to see Baxter. "Define okay. I guess this is what I get for buying used instead of new." He held a hand out to shake. "You must be one of Hild's boys." Hild's boys. That was how she referred to each and every one of them. Even to those she hadn't fostered. She had a way of filling the space and taking over your life, becoming everyone's mother. Baxter took the offered hand. He didn't feel so bad about having dirty hands since Logan was mid-repair. Logan's grip was strong, and even beneath the grime, Baxter could tell this was a man who worked with his hands and took care of them. "Baxter." "Logan." "What's the issue?" Baxter dropped to one knee next to Logan. They both leaned in, and Baxter could smell the shampoo Logan used. It was a nice smell. Clean. And he reminded himself to keep his personal observations to himself. "Not starting. I turned the key, it's making a clicking noise but the engine isn't catching." "Charged your battery?" "It's got a full charge." "Mind if I take a look?" Baxter said. "I repair small engines." "I'd be grateful. I do okay with most appliances, but this is a little out of my league." Logan rose to his feet and stepped back to give Baxter room. Giving it an expert once-over, Baxter fiddled a bit and removed one of the battery connectors. He thumbed at it. "I'm willing to bet it's your cables." "How much will it be to replace or repair?" "Not much." Baxter rose to his feet. "I have the spares at the shop and swapping them out will take all of 15 minutes. "How much?" Logan reached for his wallet, but Baxter waved him off. "If you have a 9-volt battery and no plans for lunch, we can call it even." "Hild," Logan said, pushing the plate away, "you are a fine cook." "I haven't eaten like that in years." Baxter only nodded. He was still eating. His appetite, due to his werewolf affliction, was ravenous. With a fast metabolism, he required a lot of carbs for energy. "Thank you, Logan. I admit that I miss cooking for a house full of rowdy boys." "You still cook for them, Aunt Hilde," Baxter said. "They descend every Sunday like a bunch of starving whelps." "Yes, but it's only one day a week. And every holiday reason you can come up with. You'll have to do better than that." Baxter waved his fork at her. "You're never home, anyway. We have to track you down when we want to see you. It's almost like you have a boyfriend or something." Hild's face turned pink and Baxter sat up. "So you have a boyfriend?" Logan covered his mouth and coughed to cover up a laugh. She snapped a towel at Logan. "Hush you." Baxter set his fork down and braced his elbows on the table. "Spill," he said to Logan. Logan leaned in and whispered loudly. "Harvey Batterman. He's the man who handles the landscaping around the community house. He came over to help her with her vegetable plot. He brought his tiller to plow her backyard." Hild gasped and swatted at Logan again. "That's obscene, young man." "I heard it going on all evening. Laughing and revving noises." Logan winked at Baxter. "Mrs. Norton, who lives behind us, actually called the police because they were getting so rowdy." "Well now, young lady," Baxter said, picking up Logan's teasing. "Looks like it's a good thing you have such an attentive neighbor to keep an eye on you. Do we need to start rotating nights to stay with you, to keep you out of trouble?" Hild's lips pressed into a prim line. "That's enough out of you too. I'm entitled to keep my own company, thank you very much." She propped her hands on her hips. "Don't you have a lawn mower to fix or something?" I'm here all afternoon for your honey-do list, Baxter said. Ricky's handling the shop. So Logan, tell me more about Harvey. You'll do no such thing, Logan Price. I actually have an errand for you. Hild disappeared down the hall, leaving the two of them sitting at the table. Baxter leaned in. Better escape while you can. She's the master of finding things to do. Hild reappeared moments later with a box stuffed with party decorations. Too late, Logan said. She sat it on the table, then went to the living room closet and pulled out a garbage bag filled with more Christmas decorations. I need you to take this to the community center for the party tonight. She opened one, and immediately Baxter sat up. The faint scent of cinnamon wafted from the bag. When he was just a boy and money was tight, one of Hild's projects had been to have each of the boys living with her create Christmas ornaments by hand. She experimented with dumping a huge bottle of cinnamon into the dough. They turned out all right for the handiwork of a bunch of 12-year-old boys. He dipped a hand in and came out with a handful of the silver garland she'd recycled through the years. Hild smacked his hand. Leave it. She snatched the bag away from him and tied the top into a knot. Duly chastised, Baxter turned his attention to the box of yet more Christmas decorations. In looking at them, he felt an odd wave of nostalgia wash over him. It wasn't a good sensation, either. He frowned. Aunt Hilde, he warned her in a low voice. Oh, stop being so melodramatic. The words weren't meant as harshly as they sounded. As long as he lived with Hild, he made it clear he didn't like holidays. No matter how hard Hild tried, holidays with her never shook the patina of disappointment that clung from early in his life. As a result, she was always careful to allow Baxter to participate or not, on his terms. She wrapped her arm around his shoulders and pressed a kiss to his hair. I know, baby. I know. I just need you to drop these off. Logan offered to help me, so it works out better this way. Let's get going, Baxter said after a few moments in Hild's comforting embrace. It had been those embraces, those hugs that had gotten him through his childhood. He patted her arm and pulled away. She cupped his face and searched his eyes. He wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she must have found the answer. You're fine just how you are, Baxter Lawson. The clenching in Baxter's chest didn't ease at the reassurance. Are we walking or driving? Logan asked once they wrangled the box and bag outside. Baxter paused. How far are we talking? About a block or so that way. With a gesture of the box, Logan indicated the direction. Baxter headed for his truck and gently lowered the bag in the bed. Driving. Afterward, we can swing by my shop to pick up those cables. Driving it is then. Logan waited for the door to unlock, and he shoved the box onto the floor on the passenger's side. He climbed in, arranged his feet around the box, and put on his seatbelt. We're only going up the road, Baxter said reasonably. Safety first. Right. Baxter hadn't planned on putting his seatbelt on, but it felt weird not to do it since Logan sat so primly in the front seat all buckled up. The drive was short and really didn't require putting on seatbelts, but Baxter wasn't going to make a big deal. It was kind of cute that Logan was so safety conscious, even for such a short distance. Logan led the way into the community center's main room. Tables draped with white tablecloths were pushed against the wall, lining 3 of the 4 sides. A small fir tree, bare of any ornaments, stood off to the side. Against the back wall was a small raised stage with a table, a bingo cage with the bingo balls still inside, and a microphone on a stand. They have bingo nights every Thursday night. Hild's won about $500. Baxter sat the bag on the floor near one of the tables. Get out of here. Logan slid the box onto the table. It put him very close to Baxter, and he tried very hard not to inhale. That would be creepy. Oh yeah. Has her own set of daubers and glue stick and everything. Regular little gambler, Baxter muttered. She's cutthroat. Logan crossed his arms and leaned against the table. She and Annie Luthrow almost came to blows one night. The security guard had to separate them. Hild was spitting mad about it. Hild could be a spitfire. Anyone who faced her wrath found that out. Baxter saw it in action many times when she took the schools to task for discriminating against the lichen-infected boys in her care. What was it over? I'm not certain. And she won't talk about it. Should I say anything to her? Nah, Logan said. Hold off and let's see if it becomes a habit. Excuse me, what are you doing in here? Chapter 3. It was clear from the tone that the owner of that voice wasn't pleased about something. Baxter followed Logan's gaze to see a small man with a pinched face marching over to them. He stopped in front of Logan and looked him up and down. What can I do for you, Mr. Price? Baxter was in awe at how usually considered very polite words could sound so inhospitable. Logan struggled to find a polite smile. It came across as rigid. Baxter had known Logan all of an hour, but he felt he was a good gauge of people. Logan was clearly attempting to find a polite way to interact with this puckered rosehole. Baxter was immediately on his guard. Mr. Carmen, Logan said with all the politeness of a freezer. We are dropping this off for the Christmas committee to get ready for the community party tonight. Carmen sniffed. He tugged at his ear as he regarded the box and bag, as if they were loaded with vermin. Mrs. Brentworth said the center had been scheduled in October to hold the party tonight, Logan said. We never got word that had changed. The weaselly little man fluttered a hand dismissively. Of course. I assume she also arranged for someone to clean the community center when you're done. It's all being handled, Mr. Carmen. You won't even notice we were here. Pinch-Face McDouche gave Baxter an open sneer as he looked him up. After that disapproving once-over, he turned on his heel and marched off. Baxter almost laughed out loud in the man's face. Judging by Logan's demeanor, he opted not to. He waited until they were alone before saying anything. Who the hell was that? Logan stared at the door where the man exited, as if he wanted to set the little man on fire. He shook himself out of it. Fraser Carmen. The Homeowners Association hired a management firm to handle the on-site business for the subdivision. He's a tool, Baxter observed. Logan barked out a laugh. He and Hild have bumped heads ever since they hired him. Mr. Carmen claims to protect the rights of the homeowners, but he pressed his lips together, difficult to deal with. That was a tactful way of saying he's a tool. I'm trying to be charitable. Some people don't deserve charity. Just admit he's a tool, Baxter said as he put the box under the table. He held the tablecloth out of the way for Logan to stow the bag. They should be safe there until the people decorating were ready for them. You'll feel better for it. Perhaps. He fights us regularly when we want to use the community house for neighborhood parties. Hild's most recent clash was over bingo night. Don't your fees pay for this place and to have access to use the facility? It's complicated, Logan murmured. He's certainly not making any friends. Anyway, that's done. Can I still interest you in helping me out with the lawn mower? Yeah. Baxter fluffed the tablecloth to make sure it hid the box and bag. Something about Pinch-Face McDouche Carmen didn't sit right with him. He was a little man with a little man's attitude. Baxter dealt with his fair share of them. Most walked away from Baxter with a limp. Baxter spent the rest of the afternoon over at Logan's. The cables were easily installed, but the lawnmower still wouldn't start. If we get this to my shop, I can look at it on Monday. I have parts close at hand, Baxter said as he sat on the ground. Logan settled next to him. His knee touched Baxter's thigh, and Baxter's focus shifted from why the stupid lawnmower wouldn't start to how warm Logan's knee felt pressed against him. Next time, I'm buying a new one. Nah, it's a good mower, Baxter said. He was loath to move and did so only reluctantly. On his knees, he gestured to the motor. It's seen some use, but not as much as you'd think. The previous owner probably tried to fix some of this stuff himself. Appropriately chastised, Logan said with a small chuckle. Well, I didn't mean it that way. Baxter turned to face Logan. The man was smiling, his head tilted to the side. Bangs draped over one eye. Before he could stop himself, Baxter smoothed a finger across Logan's forehead so he could see both eyes. Even behind the glasses, those were eyes that drew Baxter in. Logan held still. But it's true. I run into the same thing with my business. Repairing medical equipment is specialized, and too many hospitals try to cut corners and let their maintenance department handle it, who then only make it worse. When it comes to me in a mess, I'm expected to be a miracle worker. So we both take care of other people's good intentions and fix their screw-ups, huh? Looks that way. Baxter wished he were closer. He'd just close the distance between them and take a kiss. Not exactly polite to be sure, but it was the wolf impulse in him. It raced through his veins like liquid heat. I thought you boys could use a break. Hild's announcement broke the moment, and Logan blinked before looking up at the woman. She handed one of the glasses of tea to Logan, and the other to Baxter. Growing up, all of the pups she raised groused about the same thing, her impeccable, otherwise known as maddening sense of timing. No one could determine if it was deliberate or not. Baxter knew she was never accidental in anything she did. He held the glass up in a toast. To Florida in winter. Logan took a sip. It's a shame we can't have a snowman. I think I have some kinetic sand left over from teaching Sunday school in Birmingham, Hild said. Probably not enough for a proper snowman, though. It should be easy to make, Baxter said. In the quantities we'd need for the right size. Logan lifted his eyebrows in surprise. We can rent a cement mixer. Hild shook her head. We are not going to make kinetic sand in a cement mixer for a snowman. Actually, it'd be a sandman. Hild swatted Baxter's hair. Don't get cheeky. Logan, honey, I am so sorry to do this to you, she said with a sorrowful look that Baxter also knew was neither accidental nor sincere, but I need to run to Miss Mallory's to help her with her sheet cake. Can I prevail upon your good nature to head to the community center and start the decorations? The rest of the decoration crew will be along shortly to help. Sure, Hild. It won't take long. I left the tree set up in the corner when I picked it up yesterday. Baxter braced for it, waiting for Hild to suggest that he help Logan. To his surprise, and perhaps even disappointment, she didn't. She ruffled Logan's hair and with a smile, turned on her heel and disappeared back into her house. That was unexpected. He looked up to see Logan watching him. You caught it too? Logan asked. Baxter let out a short huff. If you mean the very pointed not suggestion that I help, yes. She's a cagey old bird, I'll give her that. She's not as slick as she believes she is. Logan set his glass to the side and rested his elbows on his knees. You don't have to. We're only using the front room of the center, so the space to decorate is small. Others will be there to help so it won't fall on me. Baxter considered bowing out. He didn't like being manipulated, even though he loved Hild very much. Yet she was always successful in getting him to do what she wanted, making him feel like it was his idea. Staring into those large brown eyes, Baxter found confirmation that all of this was an elaborate setup, and that it worked. I got nothing else to do today. I thought there was supposed to be a tree. Mrs. Howell was a petite older woman with hands that fluttered around like birds when she talked. Mr. Howell, a more severe-looking man, put their box of decorations on the table, then stood back with his hands in his pockets and a frown on his face. He was as enthusiastic to be there as Baxter was. He felt for the man. There was a perk, however, because he got to spend time with Logan. He wasn't sure if Mr. Howell had a perk. There was. Logan was also frowning. It was a fresh tree. I found it myself. Baxter didn't care that Mr. Howell frowned, but it bothered him very much to see Logan with the same expression. Maybe it's been stuck in a closet, Baxter said. The main room had been carefully cleared of any extraneous furniture to make room for the tree. The tree that was now gone. Why on earth would it be in a closet? Mr. Howell asked. Baxter shrugged. Why not a closet? He headed for the hallway. I'll look around and see where it's been moved to. We can get the rest of the decorations up and arrange the tables, Logan said. He motioned to the table where they had the ornaments stored. He pulled up the tablecloth. Or not. We did put them under here, didn't we? Pausing at the doorway, Baxter turned to see that the bag and the box were indeed missing. He lifted his nose in the air. The very faint scent of fresh pine lingered in the air, but it wasn't a strong scent, meaning the tree had definitely been moved. I'll keep an eye out for that as well. Maybe the janitor or someone moved it for safekeeping. Baxter knew better. He felt it deep in his chest. It would surprise him that it had only been moved and not destroyed. Mrs. Howell, if you could get started with what we have, I'll help Baxter look around. We may still have enough to be festive, she said with enthusiasm. After a gentle squeeze to her arm, Logan marched in Baxter's direction. His words and gesture may have been kind, but the flash in Logan's eye, the hard look and the grim set to his jaw, told a different story. They stepped into the hall and shut the door. Son of a bitch, Logan ground out through clenched teeth. Baxter waited patiently while Logan stood in the hall taking deep breaths with his eyes closed. When they opened, Logan rolled his head. Right. We need to find the tree and decorations. Chapter 4. Baxter followed Logan as they ducked into empty rooms and offices. Every turn down another hall surprised him more. Just how big is this damn place? I know, right? Logan tapped on a door. When no one answered, he eased the door open on yet another empty room. It looked smaller on the outside. The floor plan was ingenious. Seems like an awful lot of wasted space, Baxter said with a frown. Your homeowner fees go for the upkeep of this place, right? And we're supposed to have access to it. Mr. Carman keeps a very tight fist on the whole facility. There was even an adult gym at one point. Logan opened a closet door and peered into the darkness before stepping in. I don't see a light switch. I'm surprised you see anything in the dark. Baxter stepped into the closet behind Logan to help search for the light. He closed it down? Yeah. He said it was costing too much to keep it operational. We have no idea since he doesn't let us see the annual budget. Logan turned and ran into Baxter. His hands pressed against Baxter's chest. They were warm. Baxter reached out to steady him, his hands resting at Logan's waist. Oh, sorry. Don't be, Baxter mumbled. No light. Like that explained it. In the small room, Baxter heard Logan's breath speed up and his body heat rose in temperature. Baxter didn't bother moving his hands until Logan stepped back. After a few awkward moments, Logan pulled away. The light snapped on not long after that. Baxter blinked against the sudden light. Found it, Logan said. Yeah. The closet had several boxes haphazardly piled along the walls. Baxter flipped one lid off. Records of some kind. I heard they went paperless a few years back. This must be where they keep them. Instead of an actual storage room, it's in the back of a closet in an unused office? Baxter never went to college, but he was a businessman. This method of record storage didn't sit right with him. I agree. And no ornaments or tree. Logan heaved a sigh and snapped the light off again. At the door, Logan placed his hands on the door jambs. He laughed before stepping into the office. What? Baxter followed him out and shut the door. Coming out of the closet again. Baxter suspected it since Logan never gave any indication that he was uncomfortable around him. Not that it was a good indication of someone's preferences, but men tended towards bravado when faced with uncomfortable situations. Was it bad for you? Coming out? Logan shook his head. Not really. Middle-class family who were as supportive as they could be when faced with a situation they couldn't control. My mother mourned that their only child wouldn't give her grandkids, even with my reassurances that I could always adopt. What is it about the older generation and offspring needing to be actual DNA related, or it's not considered legit? That was so far removed from Baxter's experience, it was like hearing a bedtime story. I'm sure she'll come around eventually. Logan looked around the room before he headed for the door. She'll have to because it's not going to change. Let's keep looking. There can't be that many places to hide stuff in this building. The longer they searched the facility, the angrier Logan became. It was like standing on a hilltop and watching a storm roll in. Baxter saw it first on the horizon as a distant storm. As it approached closer and closer, momentum built until he was facing the dark fury. Logan vibrated from his anger and frustration. Baxter shared that anger and frustration. Is it possible that Mr. Puckerface ditched it? He risked asking. Logan turned to face him as they stood in the hall. I really don't want to consider that until I've exhausted all other options. Why not? It's the simplest explanation. Because I'll punch the guy if it is. Noticing the clenched fists, Baxter lifted one hand in his and gently encouraged Logan to unclench his fists. Logan's reaction was funny, considering Baxter was the epitome of violence due to his lichen condition. He could justify reacting violently. It was so unnatural to hear it coming from someone as tender-hearted as Logan. He massaged Logan's hand, working the tension out beneath his thumbs. Logan took a deep breath, and when he let it out, the muscles relaxed beneath Baxter's attention. They both stared at their hands until Baxter looked up to see Logan watching him. He stopped massaging and gripped Logan's hand warmly. Better now. Logan laughed. A little. Thanks for talking me down. I'm lucky if this is all it takes to talk you down. Not that I'm opposed to punching him, mind you. I'm built for violence. You're not. I'd hate to see you fall into trouble over it. I don't believe that you're built for violence. Logan slowly pulled his hands away and clasped them in front of his body. You look like a rough character, but I watch the way you talk to Hild. I bet you're all sass and very little violence. Baxter stepped back and shoved his hands in his pockets. Get to know me better, you may change your mind. Challenge accepted. Logan's smile warmed Baxter with tenderness. Baxter noticed for the first time that Logan had dimples. How cute was that? It was a smile that held no judgment. Logan was a prize, Baxter was positive of that. Would he be so lucky to have someone like that in his life? It wasn't something he considered was even a possibility. Luck never smiled as favorably upon him. Let's see if Mr. Grumpass is in his office. Maybe he can shed some light on where the tree and stuff went. I'm positive he knows. His office is just down here. Baxter didn't want to consider the implications of Mr. Grumpass actively sabotaging this party. Regardless of being a major tool, hiding ornaments in apparently a tree seemed to be too much. Surely the man had some heart buried deep beneath his puckered demeanor. With deep breaths, Baxter kept a firm lockdown on his emotions about this. A clear head was needed, and he did not need to go off on the guy. Especially in front of Logan. Logan, on the other hand, was mad as hell, even if he was trying to hide it. Baxter had only met him earlier that afternoon, but the set to the man's shoulders spoke volumes. Logan didn't need to say anything, he wore his emotions on his body, and his anger was loud and clear. The hallway in front of Grumpass's office was darkened. It held that feeling of being closed up for the day. They stopped in front of a dark-stained plywood door. The highly polished brass nameplate indicating it was Mr. Carmen's office was out of place on the cheap wood. Logan banged on the door. Mr. Carmen, if you have a moment. No answer. Baxter strained with his wolf hearing. Mr. Grumpass was in the office, he heard the man shuffling around. He even heard his breathing. Mr. Carmen, it's Logan Price. A word, please. The door swung open, and the tool was standing there with a sour look on his face as he looked Logan up and down, open disdain on his face before he looked over at Baxter. Baxter's hackles rose at the inspection. Whether the look was for Baxter or Logan, the prejudice was clear. This wasn't going to go well. Chapter 5. Whatever you want, Mr. Price, will have to wait until morning. I'm off for the evening now and need to get home, Carmen said with a nasally sneer. Baxter glanced at his watch. It was only 4:30. Don't most business offices stay open to 5? Carmen's grimace was probably supposed to be a smile. It failed on all fronts and ended up coming across as smarmy. I have things to do this evening. He turned a withering look on Baxter. And I'll be late. This won't take long, Mr. Carmen, Logan said. Baxter was in awe of Logan's patience in the face of all that. We were getting ready to set up for the Christmas party tonight, and noticed that the tree is now missing. Some ornaments are also gone. Did you by chance have them moved? You know, for safekeeping? Puckerface adjusted his glasses. I'm sure I had nothing to do with those items, as this party is apparently Mrs. Brentworth's celebration, and as you know, she's quite territorial over her projects. Logan took a deep breath. Baxter touched at his lower back and stepped in. We were wondering if maybe the tree was moved accidentally, that's all. Maybe it's stuck in a closet until tonight. It was there earlier today, so. I'm sure I don't have a clue. Try looking around. Good night. With that, Carmen shoved past Logan, sending him back into Baxter as he lost his balance. They both watched as the slimy weasel hole marched down the hall. What a tool, Logan finished for Baxter. He's moved them. He's hidden them. I'm positive. But where? Baxter glanced down the hallway they stood in. We've been in every possible room and office in this place. In unison, they both stared at the office door. Not exactly, Logan said. That would be breaking and entering, Baxter offered reasonably. He had to admit, however, that it seemed to be the most logical place. Would it? His office is technically part of the facility. It shouldn't be off limits. Logan grasped the knob. He twisted it, then jiggled it. Locked? Depends, Baxter said. Logan lifted an eyebrow. Baxter dropped to one knee to examine the lock. It was a standard knob with a keyhole in the center. His finger slid along where the door edge met the jamb. The gap was wide enough that he could see the latch mechanism. Shouldn't be a problem. Do you have a credit card? Logan pulled out his wallet and handed him one. Does that trick still work? Only on cheaper doors. Baxter fiddled a bit as he wiggled the card between the door and jamb. Going by feel, he wiggled and jiggled and pulled until he felt it give way. Smiling, he swung the door open and presented the card back to Logan. I see why Hild considered you such a troublemaker, Logan said, returning his smile. He took the card and stepped into the office, flicking the light on. She had a soft spot for troubled youths. Baxter shut the door and glanced around. It was a standard office for the most part. Nothing personal decorated the desk or the walls. A simple desk and office chair. Filing cabinets were tucked in one corner, and long bookcase extended along another wall. Logan circled around, dragging his fingers along the bookshelf. The decor matches the personality. Sterile, bland, and boring. I wouldn't be surprised if these books were just for decoration. Baxter saw a door leading off one wall and opened it. It was a small closet. He clicked on the light to see a few coats, various pieces of surplus office supplies stuffed into boxes. Nothing in here, he said, backing out and shutting the door. Logan straightened from having looked under the desk. Not here either. He flopped into the chair. I can't imagine where the stuff would be. Pushing the adding machine out of the way, Baxter perched on the edge of the desk. He picked up a pile of papers and started sorting through them. Totally uninteresting. You handled him well, he said. I don't know if I would have been that nice had you not been here. Logan rolled his head side to side against the seat's headrest. I'm pretty sure you would have. You're a nice guy, Logan. People respond well to nice guys. Present Weasel Puss aside. Baxter flapped the slips of paper in the direction of the door. I wanted to punch him for the way he looked at you. Startled, Baxter glanced at Logan, who was watching him. For what? The look on his face when he talked at you was gross, Baxter. Logan sat forward to rest his elbows on the desktop. His arm rested against Baxter's thigh. Like you were lower than him. I mean, to me, he was just rude. I'm a resident. He ultimately works for me, however indirectly. To you, that was inexcusable. Huh? I didn't notice. That wasn't a lie. Baxter was so used to people looking at him like that, for whatever their reasons. That he was blue-collar and fixed lawn mowers. That he had the heavy brow, which was one of the markers of lichen infection. That he had tattoos. I guess I'm used to it. Logan's hand rested on his knee. His skin tingled from the contact even through the denim of his jeans. You shouldn't have to, Baxter. That's the point. Maybe it was a risk to put his hand over Logan's, but his instincts told him otherwise. He wrapped his fingers around Logan's hand. Comes with the territory. All people know was that I used to be an at-risk youth, and would hardly amount to anything. I'm not sure I did when I grew up. Baxter shook his head. I'll live. When you what? Logan looked up into his eyes. If there was judgment there, even a hint of it, or pity, Baxter would have spotted it. Those were looks he got ever since he was told he had been infected. It was a sure way to get Baxter to shut down on them. Better to shut down than risk being hurt. Baxter's throat threatened to close up. He swallowed thickly. I think you know. Probably. Say it anyway. Logan stood to move in front of Baxter. His tone was almost a challenge. It hinted at test me, let me show you who I am. I was born with the lichen virus. My mother had been infected with it when she was pregnant with me. No one really believed that werewolves were real until the outbreak started, 30 years ago. They still don't know how, only that the virus is transmitted by bite, usually by an uncontrolled werewolf. It's not hereditary, but pregnant women who are attacked pass on the infection to their unborn. Those mothers who survive the birth don't typically last long afterward. My father flat out refused to acknowledge me. I was sent to my mother's family, who couldn't keep me. Couldn't handle me, they said. It was the virus made me a wild child. So I was put into the system. Baxter dropped his gaze to watch how perfectly his hands fit over Logan's hip bones. It felt natural, like Logan had been born just for him. And ended up with Hild, Logan said softly. His fingers were combing through Baxter's hair. The touch was gentle and tender, something so rarely shown to people like Baxter. After bouncing around a few homes, yeah. She took the lichen-infected in. Gave us stability and helped to navigate through the bureaucracy. Even now, we have to continue to prove that we aren't uncontrolled. Logan shook his head. I don't understand. What is meant by uncontrolled? To Logan's credit, he didn't move away. He stayed close to Baxter, his scent filling Baxter's head. Something welled up in Baxter's chest. He took deep breaths to keep it from overwhelming him. We have to learn to control our nature, or it overwhelms us. We're monitored every year. Sort of like parole. Interviews, medical tests. That sounds oppressive. It's better than being hunted and put down. Anyway, the virus is manageable now. The rare outbreak in remote parts of the world gets quarantined until it's under control. Like any disease or viral infection. It still happens, just with less frequency. Thank you. Logan squeezed his hand. I can see this is difficult for you to talk about. I don't know why I even told you. Baxter shifted on the desk so Logan could stand between his knees. He smoothed his hands over Logan's hips before drawing him to stand closer. I could have lied about it. No, you couldn't. Logan lifted his chin in confidence. I already told you I don't believe that crap about you being built for violence. I believe that includes lying to me. Just like you don't lie to Hild. I used to lie to her. Not for long, I bet. No. Baxter chuckled. Not for long. Logan's warm hand cupped Baxter's cheek. He leaned forward, closing the distance between their mouths. Suddenly he stopped, both hands firm on Baxter's shoulders to shove back. The janitor. Baxter blinked rapidly. The what? Ralph, the janitor. Maybe he knows what happened to the tree. He's also playing our Santa, so he should still be around. Logan pushed back and headed for the door before Baxter registered what he'd said. Disappointed they were interrupted by a train of thought, he slid from the desk and paused to put most of the stuff back into place. Once the door locked in place behind him, he chased after Logan. Logan stood outside a janitorial closet. He rattled the knob when Baxter caught up with him. "Do your trick with the lock again," he said excitedly. "It's still breaking and entering, you know," Baxter said, holding his hand out for Logan's credit card. "This is important. A lot of kids are looking forward to this party, and we put in so much time with the planning. I hate to be thwarted like this." Logan stepped back for Baxter to inspect the lock. Baxter peered at the locking mechanism. For such an upscale neighborhood, why they didn't have better locks on their doors was beyond him. Was the facility better secured by the outside doors? A security guard that tootled around on a golf cart, maybe? Who knew? All that mattered was that the lock gave way easily, and Logan was able to get in. The door swung open to a cramped closet jammed with cleaning supplies. It even smelled like a cleaning closet, and Baxter started sneezing from the strong chemical smells. He backed up while Logan poked around. "There's not even enough room to stash a tree, much less hide it," Baxter said, pinching his nose closed. "I know," Logan said, sounding dejected. He kicked a bag as he readied to close the door. It made a distinctive clank noise. Whatever it was, it didn't sound good. "Oh no. Oh no. What, oh no?" Baxter, alarmed, stepped behind Logan to peer over his shoulder. Logan bent to pull something from a trash bag. It was a bottle of Jim Beam. More specifically, it was an empty bottle, and the alcohol smell was still very strong. Baxter took the bottle and held it up. There wasn't a drop left in it. "Don't tell me, your janitor has a love for Jim." "Something like that. More like he can't hold his liquor but loves to drink anyway. He was given the job because his problem made him hard to employ elsewhere. At least here, he was given a new start. We were trying to encourage him to maybe cut down on how much he consumed. Help him get back on his feet." "That's very generous of you," Baxter said. "Not many would give someone a chance to pick up their life and try to get back on track. Many of us in the community believe in giving people chances. The job wasn't very demanding, and we voted that part of our dues would go to paying his salary." Logan sighed heavily and put the bottle on a shelf before closing the door. "I really hope that this doesn't mean what I think it means." Baxter settled a hand on Logan's shoulder. "Maybe it doesn't. If he was due to be the Santa, he's got to be around here somewhere." With a nod, Logan squared his shoulders. "Let's head back to the main hall and see what they're able to do with the decorations we still have, and take stock of the situation. Then we'll go look for him." If that bottle had been new, Baxter didn't think there was much chance of finding him. Chapter 6. Considering Hild's bag of decorations was missing, as well as the tree, the hall looked far more festive than anticipated when Baxter and Logan got back to the main hall. They had pushed the bingo machine into hiding, set up the chair and the backdrop where Santa was to sit for the kids, and many of the residents had started bringing their food early for the potluck dinner. Hild broke from a small group of women who were supervising how to arrange the desserts on the table and approached the two men. "Baxter, did you decide to stay and help?" Baxter kissed Hild's cheek. He gently squeezed her arm and whispered in her ear, "You knew very well I would." She pulled back, giving him a very prim look. To most she probably looked like the very soul of innocence, but Baxter knew her better than anyone. "I'm sure I don't know what you're going on about. Patrice Howell told me about the minor snafu we've run into with the tree, and said you and Logan had gone to find it." Logan shook his head and gave her a hug. "We haven't yet. It's well and truly hidden from us. It's not in the building anywhere." Hild tapped at her lip in thought. "Have you looked outside yet?" Baxter and Logan both looked at each other. "We hadn't thought of that," Logan admitted. "But it fits. Sometimes the simplest answer is the correct one. Now you two run along. And see if you can find Ralph. I want to make sure the Santa suit fits him, or if we need to get some pillows to help fill him out." Logan yanked hard on Baxter's arm, pulling him away before he could explain to her about the empty bottle. He stumbled behind Logan as they left the hall. "You didn't want to tell her what we found?" he asked once they were clear of eavesdroppers. "Not until we know for sure." Logan motioned for Baxter to follow him to the back of the building. At the end of the hall, there was an emergency exit sign. "How is it that you know the building so well?" "I like to know the layout of the buildings I spend time in. Entrances and exits, bathrooms, closets, it just helps to have a familiarity with your space. I also helped develop the fire and emergency evacuation plan with the fire marshal. Once they added the South Wing addition, their old plan was outdated." Baxter smiled. "Have you always been this safety conscious?" "I'm not that bad, am I?" "Well, you did put on a seatbelt to travel 2 blocks. I'm just saying." The blush that crept along Logan's neck and touched his cheeks was just so damn cute it made Baxter's fingers curl. "Hazard of the job, I guess. I sell, rent, and repair medical equipment. It may not be a lot to some people, but it's important to me that everything works properly since most of them are used in the emergency room. My dad isn't very safety conscious himself, and growing up we had more than a few hair-raising events that could have been disastrous. Nothing ever happened though, did it?" "No. My mom was really good about diverting him before disaster struck." "Your folks sound like good people," Baxter observed. Logan shrugged and pushed through the door leading to the outside. "They are. I'm very blessed with loving, supportive family. Even if my father does boneheaded stuff that threatens to kill, maim or injure him in some hysterical only after the fact manner. Hold my beer kind of stuff." "Oh yeah." The afternoon sun was sinking, but it was still above the horizon. Plenty of light. It was enough to see their surroundings. Just beyond the door was a small parking lot with spaces enough for about 8 cars. At the back of the lot ran a wooden fence to separate the community house from the nearest neighbor. To the far right side of the lot sat a small alcove where the dumpster was hidden behind a brown wooden section. The gate to the dumpster section was open. On the ground sat a small white trash bag. Baxter tapped Logan's arm, motioned toward it, and then went to investigate. Pulling the bag open, it confirmed Baxter's suspicions. Hild's Christmas decorations. He sank to his heels and rummaged around in the bag. "There's a few broken ornaments, but otherwise, everything still looks good." Logan rose to his toes to flip open the dumpster. The container lid flipped back to bang against the wooden fence. Nestled in amongst the garbage and the god-awful smell, the small fresh pine tree lay forlornly. Several of its branches had been broken off and listed lifelessly off to one side of the tree. "And I found the tree." "Damn it." Logan slapped at the dumpster and backed away, his hands perched on his hips as he paced back and forth. "It can be salvaged. We can turn the broken part to the wall. No one will see it," Baxter offered in a hopeful tone. He hated to see Logan this upset. More than hated it, it offended him to see Logan upset. He braced his hands on the edge and made the jump to swing one leg over into the bin. Before Baxter's leg cleared, a jerk on his belt pulled him back to the ground. "It's in with the garbage, and it reeks in there, if you hadn't noticed." Baxter noticed. It wasn't going to stop him from trying. Logan gave Baxter's belt another gentle tug before he let go. He went back to the dumpster and gestured inside with a finger. "It looks like something was thrown in on top. It's gross. I can't in good conscience put this up where there will be children." Easing the lid back over to close it up, Baxter picked up the bag of ornaments and slung them over his shoulder. "At least we have these. Let's get them inside. Maybe they can come up with something that will work instead of a tree." The decorations were spread out on a spare table. Some were still in one piece. Others were broken or crushed. It was with a heavy heart Baxter watched as they were pitched into the trash can. That was his childhood they were throwing away. Hild's face, bless her, she tried to keep her expression schooled while she went about her task. Some of the ornaments being tossed she had made years ago when he was still living with her. They were ornaments that all the boys living with her helped to make. Now they were ruined and had to be thrown away like garbage. He couldn't tell if it made Hild mad, but it was starting to stir up some anger in Baxter. He worked hard to manage his anger, and this was threatening to unravel it. "I have some leftover garland," one of the younger decorators piped up. She rested her hand on her pregnant belly. "I can call my husband to bring it. We could hang it on the wall, and then hang the ornaments from it. Or trim the tables with it, if there's enough," said another woman, probably older than Hild. The elderly matron was a champ at using her walker to get around, mostly using it as a battering ram to get to the front of the gathered group. "And pile the small gifts we got the kids on the table." Hild sighed and pushed her hand across her forehead. "It would have been more Christmas-y to have them under a tree, but if someone has a red pillowcase, we can do a whip stitch with garland or something around the edge for Santa's bag," Logan suggested. "That's a good idea." Someone else chimed in. There was a gathering collecting around the chair as they brainstormed on how to salvage not having a tree. "Did you find Ralph?" Hild asked when she turned to Baxter. "No, ma'am. We only found the ornaments and the tree so far." Hild didn't hide her disappointment. With her lips pressed together, she nodded slowly. Behind her eyes, Baxter knew her mind was ramped up to 1,000 RPM. "Logan and I will keep looking for him." He tugged on Logan's sleeve, and they stepped away to let the decorating committee continue their collaborative effort to decorate. They drifted into the kitchen area where some of the food was still waiting to be assembled and placed on the table. It was tempting to grab one of the small finger sandwiches. His stomach growled noisily. Logan patted it gently. "In a bit, big guy. We still have work to do." The words were spoken in a very intimate way. They really had only just met, and already Baxter felt a familiarity with Logan. The last time he'd had these feelings of warmth and acceptance had been too long ago. It was just easier to keep his distance from normal people and stay with his own kind. That was funny. Humanity was his own kind. Only now, he had a virus he had to live with, and that immediately marked him as an outsider to his kind. Yet here was this amusing, gentle, kind, loving man treating him like he wasn't infected with a virus that would turn him into a large, scary monster, even though Baxter had long ago learned to control his monstrous behavior. But he was still hungry. "Where do we look now?" Baxter asked when the warmth of Logan's hand disappeared. "We've been all over the building. Do you think he went home?" "Possibly. I thought I saw his truck in the parking lot, but who knows?" Logan's brow furrowed. That made his nose scrunch up. It was a cute expression on Logan. It caused his glasses to slide down his nose, and Logan pushed at them in irritation. There are only so many places to hide. Let's check the pool area. There are small showers and bathrooms. Maybe he's there. Logan took off at a rapid walk, and Baxter had to trot to catch up. "You have a pool?" "Technically, yes. Mr. Carmen posted weird hours, which makes it difficult for residents to actually find time to use it. He managed to even make it nearly impossible for the kids to enjoy the pool, even during the summer. Grumpface really was a major tool. Why is he even working here? Hasn't someone complained to the management company?" "Plenty of times, actually. Whoever is fielding the calls is reporting it back to him, which only makes him be more difficult." "A tool." "That too." The pool area wasn't half bad. Not as big as, say, a community pool, but it was still nice. The concrete area immediately surrounding the pool itself was in good shape. Just beyond the pool extended another grassy area with 2 poles in the ground and a small stationary grill. "Holy shit," Baxter said, pausing at the low wrought iron fence that marked the pool area. "You guys have a volleyball net too. And a place to cook out?" Logan gave Baxter a wry grin. "Yep. And you have to jump through hoops to get to use it too." "Yep." This was getting to be out of hand. Someone needs to take him behind the woodshed. "Not that I advocate actual violence," says the guy who said he wanted to punch Puckerface. "I was speaking metaphorically." "Aha." Logan leapt the fence easily and headed for the small, low building at the back end of the pool area. As I was saying, not that I advocate violence, I think a good spanking might do the man some good. I volunteer, Baxter said as he leapt behind Logan and followed him. I think you need to stay out of it. We could hire someone. Who knows, it might loosen him up a bit. Logan paused and turned a discerning gaze on Baxter. You know, that idea actually has some merit. From behind the men's dressing room door, a song rang out. The words were slurred, and not just a little bit, either. Just before I go to sleep, there's a rendezvous I keep. With a sigh, Logan scrubbed at his face. Oh boy. Chapter 7. No kidding, Baxter agreed. He's no Dean Martin. After Logan shot a sour look in his direction, Baxter smiled sheepishly. I'm glad you're taking this so well, Logan said. I'm not really. I made some of those broken ornaments. That was my childhood, this rat trap Mr. Carmen destroyed through his careless disregard for others. I really don't take that sort of thing lightly. Baxter caught himself and took a deep, cleansing breath. But it doesn't solve the issue. The people doing the decorating are coming up with creative ways to salvage it, so I guess there's that. Logan turned to face Baxter. He stepped close. As close as they stood together, Baxter felt Logan's body heat. The faint scent of Logan's aftershave touched at his nose. You're a very remarkable man, Baxter. It was Baxter's turn to blush. He shoved his hands in his pocket and shifted his weight. Not really. No. No, you really are. And a dream I always meet helps me forget we're fire apart, warbled out from behind the closed door. Baxter sighed. He made a motion for Logan to go in first. They entered the changing area of the restroom to find Ralph, or who Baxter thought was Ralph, stinking drunk and sitting on one of the benches. He had a half-empty bottle in his hand, which he waved at the two of them. Hello there, young fellas, Ralph said in a drunkenly cheerful voice. He swayed on the bench. Logan rushed forward to keep him from pitching over backward. Nearby was the mop and bucket. Eyeing the floor, it looked like it had only been half used, and not very well either. Ralph, Logan said breathily. Thank God we found you. The party is getting ready to start. So it is, Mr. Price, so it is, Ralph said in a sing-song voice. Did you remember that you were supposed to be Santa this year? Ralph stopped weaving where he sat and twisted his mouth in thought. Yeah. I am Santa this year. He took a huge slug from the bottle. Baxter patiently took the bottle and looked around for the cap. He's in no condition right now. Does Mr. McSormouth allow the kitchen to keep a coffee maker? I can run back and get mine if I need to, but I think the Howells were bringing theirs. Baxter glanced at his watch. Hopefully, they'd have time to sober Santa up before the party started. It wasn't looking good, though. Ralph tried to chase Baxter to get his bottle back. Baxter pulled it out of reach, and Ralph ended up sliding off the bench onto the floor. Oops. Yeah, oops, Logan muttered. We're in trouble. We can't take him to the center like this. It will put more pressure on them than they need right now. Baxter glanced around. Ralph? I don't know you, Ralph said, squinting his eyes. He motioned for Baxter to come closer. When Baxter sunk to his knees, Ralph made a lunge for the bottle again. Who are you? Miss Hild is a good friend of mine, Baxter said, holding the bottle away. Logan plucked it from his hand. Behind them, the telltale sound of liquid going down the drain bounced off the tile walls. Ah. Ralph said sadly. That's nice. Hild's nice. Logan, he's nice too. You seem nice. Ralph? Logan tossed the bottle into the trash on the cleaning cart. Who gave you the whiskey? Mr. Carmen. He said happy holidays. Which was weird because he doesn't like holidays. Or even like me. And he gave me 2 bottles of Beam. He's nice too. Everyone's nice. Great. A happy drunk. Better than dealing with a crying one. I don't think we'll have time to sober him up. Logan glanced at his watch and did the same mental math Baxter did. We have to try. I'll get him a cup of strong coffee. You, he waved his hands, keep him here. They sure as hell weren't going anywhere else. Logan disappeared, leaving the two alone. He settled on the floor next to Ralph. So how are you doing, Mr. Ralph? Do you like working here? Ralph nodded his head but lost control and tipped to the side to crash into Baxter. He righted himself. I do. It's a good job. They don't complain if I come in late, as long as I get the job done. Everyone's nice. Spend a lot of time sleeping off a binge? Baxter asked. Ralph paused, his face pinching at some memory. Sometimes. It's why you can't hold down too many jobs, isn't it? I get what you're doing. This is an intervention, innit? Ralph waved his hands in front of him. I don't have a problem. I got it under control. I think you do have a problem. And you know what else I think? Ralph shook his head. I think you know it too. Let me show you something. Baxter rose to his feet. He extended a hand down to help Ralph up. The big guy struggled to his feet, but he was able to stand without tipping off balance. Guiding the man to the door, he held Ralph in place and pointed to the parking lot. See that? A small stream of people were walking in the front door of the main community hall. Some had small children in tow. Others were laden down with food and what looked to be more decorations. Ralph nodded. Those people, those children are counting on Santa showing up. Baxter slung his arm around Ralph's shoulders. Their parents took time out of their Christmas Eve with family to throw this party for the neighborhood kids. They were counting on you. Do you think you can go in there now and be Santa for them? Ralph squared his body and lifted his chin. I do. Smartly he stepped forward, clipped the door jamb and spun to land on his back. Luckily, his head hung off the concrete pad, cushioned by the grass. Baxter stood above him, his arms crossed. Or not. Or not, Ralph agreed. Maybe, Ralph, you have a problem. Ralph started to cry. Shit. Logan jogged across the pool area, carefully trying to not spill the coffee. Oh my God, what happened? He said, out of breath. Ralph and I were just having a heart-to-heart. Your heart-to-hearts end with people sprawled on their back. Ralph sobbed heavily. And you made him cry. Baxter spread his hands. I didn't make him cry. It's a drunk cry born out of a realization that he's disappointed a lot of kids. Logan gave Baxter the look. It was a look straight from Hild's playbook. It said, we'll discuss this later. Come on, Ralph, let's get back inside the dressing room and get some of this delicious hot coffee in you. They struggled to get Ralph to his feet and settled on the bench. The drunk man took the coffee gratefully. He was a little off on his aim to blow on it to cool it off, but like a champ, he didn't complain about it being too hot. I'm sorry, Mr. Price. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I would be lying if I said there's nothing to be sorry for, Logan began. It was apparent he was trying to measure his words. Admirable, but this was a situation where there was no being kind about it. The saving grace was that Ralph was drunk. So maybe he would remember the words and not the tone. But we are in a bit of a pickle now. We don't have a Santa, and those kids were expecting one. It's what tied the whole party together. Santa coming in and distributing candy and presents. Taking wish lists and making the kids feel special. Ralph started crying again. The horror on Logan's face when he realized he was the one who'd made Ralph cry this time was funny. Baxter covered his mouth so Logan couldn't see him laughing. I can do it. I just need some time, Ralph said, slurping on the coffee. Baxter glanced at his watch and shook his head. I don't think we'll make it, he mouthed to Logan. Logan nodded that he understood. His expression grew thoughtful. Through narrowed eyes he eyeballed Baxter up and down. Baxter shifted uncomfortably under Logan's gaze. Ralph, where's the Santa suit right now? I think it's still in the cleaning closet. Ralph was still sloshing around, drunk as a skunk, but he was able to put together what Logan was implying. It'll be too big for you, Mr. Price. But it might fit him. He gestured to Baxter. Hell no, Baxter said. Logan's hopeful look almost softened his resolve. Almost. No. I'm not Santa material. Come on, Baxter. We need a Santa. I don't even like kids, Logan. And now you want them crawling all over me. The last time I dealt with kids was when I punched out Thomas Covington for being difficult in 2nd grade, Baxter ground out. This will be different. You're an adult. You have the advantage of height, weight, and maturity. My height, weight, and maturity are exactly why I'm a bad idea. Baxter thought that Logan was going to push the issue. Instead, he just rose to his feet. Let's see if we can get Ralph back to the community house kitchen. Maybe food in his stomach will help sober him up. The staggering part wasn't the problem. Between the two of them, they were able to point Ralph in the general direction and let him continuously fall toward the main building. Navigating the wrought iron fence was the challenge. Thankfully, there weren't any ornamentals over the top of it where Ralph could impale himself or worse. Logan hopped the fence first and helped as they swung one of Ralph's legs over. He collapsed against Baxter. Not ready for the sudden weight of a man who outweighed him by almost 50 pounds, Baxter caught an elbow in the nose. Flailing limbs were the only way to balance him on the edge of the fence as Baxter lifted his leg over to set him down on the other side. Logan caught the full weight of the drunk man, and they both tumbled to the grass. Ow. Baxter hopped over to help everyone back to their feet, with a silent prayer that they didn't have the same trouble going up the few stairs to get into the building. There was no sneaking in the back entrance. Colliding with the walls as the three continued to stagger down the hallway, Hild met them just outside the community kitchen. Is he? Logan nodded. That's why you tore out of here with a hot cup of coffee. Yes, ma'am. She rushed into the kitchen ahead of them and cleared off a chair. Set him down, she said, flapping a towel for him to sit, and let's see if we can salvage this. Baxter bit his tongue. He didn't see a way to salvage Ralph. Maybe in the morning the man would be truly remorseful and realize the weight of the situation. Even drunk, he was a little remorseful now, but drunk and sober are two different states. This was why Baxter hated holidays. Someone always managed to ruin it. A small commotion gathered around them in the kitchen. Baxter paused in the doorway as more of the decorating committee took over, hovering around Ralph. The drunk man was refusing to eat, insisting he could be Santa. Logan was effectively pushed out of the way. He backed up until he was even with Baxter. What are we going to do? No one else can really fill in at this point. All the people here are parents, and they want to spend the party with their kids, not dividing their attention between family and taking care of the rest of the kids. By that, Baxter heard the implication that everyone was playing not it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Baxter checked to see who the text message was from. Invite is still open to a quiet night. He thumbed in his reply. Have you started drinking yet? Baxter was all about getting in on the drinking after this day. Nope. Just got home from the hospital. Baxter tapped his thumb against the side of his phone. An idea was forming in his head. Don't pop one just yet. Call Xander, Jared, and anyone else you can get a hold of tonight. Logan. I need the code to get into your garage. And start the party. Santa will be here within the hour. Chapter 8. By the time Baxter got the garage door open, the hydraulic drive on the mower disengaged and pushed back out onto the driveway. 2 cars drove up, and the members of his extended family, his pack, were climbing out like it was a clown car. Clint waved the red and white costume in his hand. I rounded up everyone I could on short notice. My tree is in the back seat. I warn you, it's not very big. Baxter clapped him on the shoulder. It'll be perfect. He did a head count. Including himself, there were 9 of them total. Not bad. Did you bring the chain from the shop? Ricky jogged to the trunk of the second car and pulled out the chain. He piled it on the ground next to the John Deere. "Why are we here, Bax?" Jared picked up the chain before dropping it again. "We are going to do community service." That got some disgruntled murmuring from them, not all of it repeatable in polite company. Baxter frowned. "Aunt Hilde planned a party, and it's been sabotaged from the beginning. We are going to make it as right as we can." The more vocally disgruntled at least had the good graces to be chagrined at how they'd bitched about it. "What's the plan then?" Clint asked. "Are you up for playing Santa again for a bunch of kids?" Clint grinned. "I'm all for it." "Good. Ricky, go to the community house down this way," Baxter pointed. "Find a guy named Logan and get the sack of gifts and the extra Santa costume. Don't let Hild see you. Jared, take 2 of the others and go into Hild's house and find the extra clothesline she had left over from when we put that up. Someone get the tree out of the car. The rest of you are going to find a way to turn the chain and line into a harness." Xander picked up the chain, dangling it between 3 fingers as if it was a snake. "Oh sure, give us the impossible task." Baxter pulled out his wallet and counted the dreadfully small number of bills. "And everyone pony up $5. I have to make a dollar store run." Miltonville wasn't very big, all things considered. For such a small town population of around 9,000 people, it was refuge for no less than $3 stores and 2 Family Dollar marts. It was one of the richest towns in the county, and yet most of the people shopped at the dollar store. Which was why they were so rich. The first store was a bust for 1 item, but for candy canes it was a gold mine. He bought 5 boxes of the 18 count. That should be enough for each of the kids to get a few and some of the adults. It was at the second store that Baxter hit the jackpot. It had exactly what he was looking for. He bought up their stock and rushed through checkout. By his watch, he had about half an hour to put his plan into motion. He made it out of the store, attention focused on shoving the change into his wallet. He collided with someone coming in, almost knocking them over. "Shit. Sorry." 2 hands held at his arms. "There you are." Baxter's heart raced when he recognized the voice and his head snapped up. "Logan? What are you doing here?" "I met one of your guys. Ricky. He came looking for the small gifts and the Santa costume. I wouldn't let him go until he told me he knew you. Since I let you have my garage code, I had a suspicion you were up to something. I went to my house to find it overrun with other men I didn't know, standing on my lawn looking perplexed at my currently not running lawnmower. It took a little to parse out what they were telling me. One of them mentioned you were on a dollar store run. This is my 3rd stop. And here you are." Logan smiled. "And here I am. Now, you want to tell me what you're planning? Maybe I can help. Meet me back at your place. I can't play Santa, but I can do other things to help the kids out." "The kids you don't like." Baxter grunted. "I didn't say I don't like them." "Yes, you did. You explicitly said, and I don't even like kids. Those were your exact words." "I didn't mean I don't like them. I just don't have time to explain. I'm burning minutes. I promised you Santa would be there in an hour, and I am going to hold to that. But I need to get back to your house." Logan pulled at one of the bags and peered in. "Okay. I'll meet you there." They were losing light when Baxter pulled up. By his watch, they still had 15 minutes to put his plan into motion, provided the guys had done what he'd asked of them. "Not sure this is gonna work, Bax," Jared said. "Even if we did know what exactly you have planned." Baxter handed off the bags to Ricky and inspected their work. "We need some padding here if it's going to rest against my chest." Logan parked his car on the street in front of his house. He trotted up to the men. "This is Logan, owner of our sled. These are more of Hild's boys." Baxter went around the group naming them. Judging by Logan's expression, he wasn't going to remember their names. That was fine. If Logan trusted Baxter, then hopefully, Logan would know to trust them. Warily, Logan greeted them with a nod and an uncertain smile. "Yes, we met briefly. They nodded in return. Logan noticed the chains and clothesline. "Baxter, are you going to do what I think?" Baxter pulled out one of the 7 reindeer antler headbands he'd gotten at the store and thrust the remaining at Logan. Yes, we are." Ricky took it from Baxter and turned it over in his hands. "How are they going to stay on our heads?" "One thing at a time. Did you get the extra Santa suit?" "I did." Ricky went to where it had been piled on the seat. "Good. You're now Clint's helper elf. You two go get changed. Logan, do you have a pillow?" Baxter held up the makeshift harness. Jared helped him untangle it. Logan snapped his fingers. He started at a run to his front door, then slid to a stop. "How much time do I have?" "As quick as possible. I guess Santa can be fashionably late." "All right, guys. Everybody shift. I guess. We have to figure out how to do this, and it would help if we had bodies." Logan waved his hand as if to push that from his mind. "Right." After Logan disappeared into his house, Baxter motioned for his crew to get into 4-legged form. "If he freaks, I'm peeing in his azalea bush," Xander said. When Logan came out, he was dressed in a clean shirt and slacks. Baxter took that moment to appreciate how good the man looked in business casual. Woof. He slowed his run and looked at the 6 wolves milling about on his lawn. Scattered among them were piles of discarded clothing, which obviously belonged to said wolves. "You know, if you had told me this would be my evening when I first met you, I would have laughed at the absurdity of it." Baxter grinned shyly. "It's still a little absurd. I mean, Santa's wolves. How do we explain that to the kids?" "I'll think of something." Logan handed Baxter a small rectangular sheep-covered pad. "Will this work for the harness so the chain doesn't cut into you?" Taking the pad, their fingers brushed, and Baxter's breath caught in his chest. The wind picked up, and Baxter caught scent of his cologne again. Rich and deep without being overpowering, even for sensitive wolf noses. Blood rushed through him, and his limbs warmed against the first chill of twilight. Throughout this utterly ridiculous idea, Logan handled himself with such aplomb as to be rock-solid assurance to Baxter. If he were in the market for a mate, Logan would be a real contender. Behind him, a couple of wolves made hacking and coughing noises. Baxter turned a sour look on them as they all stared back. "Give me a break, okay?" Logan, unaware of the shit his pack was giving him, fiddled with the chain. He glanced at Baxter. "Are you going to shift or pull like that?" "Right, boss," he said with a wink, and enjoyed the pink color it brought to Logan's cheeks. There was soft howling behind him. "All right, you randy lot. Keep a lid on it." Shifting into wolf form was second nature now. Baxter could do it with minimal discomfort, although he'd never shifted in front of anyone other than his wolf brethren. The regular rank-and-file human didn't react well when seeing it. He felt Logan's curious gaze on him as his nose elongated, joints popped and snapped as the bone structure rearranged. Dropping to his hands and knees, limbs were arranged for 4-footed travel now, instead of being bipedal. He gave a full-body wiggle and stepped out of his clothing, leaving them behind in a pile. Being in wolf form, perspective changed. He saw the world from a different angle, both figuratively and literally. Sounds were sharper, smells were more intense. Logan's body chemistry immediately imprinted itself into his memory. There would never be a time where Baxter couldn't find Logan based on smell. It was a leather smell, with a base note of a deep spice. Not the baked bread smell they all associated with Hild. Baxter committed it to his feral memory. Logan let out the breath he was holding. "Nope. Never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it." With a shake, he remembered what he was doing, and dropped to one knee to concentrate on the harness. Once they got it fitted, Baxter pulled against the resistance of the heavy mower behind him. By himself, Baxter could pull the mower, but it would be a struggle. It would roll easier when all the wolves were hooked into the harness. Ricky helped as Clint loaded up the small tree, the bag of gifts and candy onto the back of the mower, strapping it down with bungee cords. As a final act of policing the area, Ricky grabbed their clothing and stuffed them into bags for when they'd need them later. Logan tore open one of the antler headbands and knelt in front of Baxter. He slid the plastic over Baxter's head. It wasn't gripping tightly enough, and it shifted to the side. Patiently, Logan straightened it, pausing as it shifted to the side again. "We may have to get some of Hild's yarn to hold this into place." "I can get that. I know where she keeps her stash," Ricky said, and he raced off for Hild's house. He returned shortly with a skein of green yarn. A few adjustments later, and it felt like it was staying in place when Baxter bobbed his head. Logan gazed into Baxter's eyes and he smiled. "You're a remarkable man, Baxter, for someone who doesn't like kids." Baxter was not in a position to explain. He opted to lick at Logan's hand. Logan placed a hand on Baxter's snout and gave it an affectionate shove. "You'll kiss me proper when this is all over." The rest of his pack yipped and howled. Good God, he was never going to live that down. Chapter 9. Even though 7 of them were pulling the damned lawnmower, it still took Ricky pushing from behind to keep their momentum as they dragged it down the street. Clint, the lazy bastard, rode it like he owned it, keeping his hands firmly on the wheel so they wouldn't veer off and collide with the sidewalk curb. Was this how horses felt drawing carriages? Baxter mentally made a note to look that up when he was back at the shop. They didn't have a lot to work with getting a proper harness set up, so perhaps that was the key. Nothing about this was ordinary, so he couldn't very well expect ordinary results. Maybe he should have thought this through better, but they were committed now. Once they were moving, Ricky ran alongside straightening the antlers when they managed to spin on their heads to dangle under their chins. Logan drove his car, beeping as he passed them, to the community center to prepare the kids for the coming of Santa. By the time Baxter and company showed up, the kids were lined up at the window. If there was ever a moment he had his doubts that they could pull this off, all of that washed away in the shrieks of delight when Clint dismounted off the mower, taking on his role as Santa very seriously. He ho-ho-hoed in a booming voice as Ricky trotted along behind to help manage the bag of toys. They were welcomed warmly into the community center. Baxter watched as the children danced and cheered. Their giggles and laughter was all the currency he needed to know this was the right thing to do. But now what were they supposed to do? They couldn't very well shift back into human form right there in front of people. Some of the parents glanced out of the front windows nervously at them as it was. Nor could they get out of the makeshift harness without help. Looked like they were in for a long night. They sat out at the curb, chained up to a John Deere, waiting for someone to come take pity on them. As the sounds of the party went into full swing, with laughter and Christmas music, Logan came out of the center. Several of the children wanted to meet Santa's reserve sleigh pullers, he said with a laugh. He unhitched the wolves and helped straighten their antlers as he went along the line. When he got to Baxter, he straightened the antlers again, taking his time to run his fingers through his fur. He kneaded over Baxter's ears, which felt divine. Being touched in wolf form was not something that happened, well. It was a rare thing. Baxter lifted his nose to scent the air. He smelled the now familiar shampoo. But there was no fear. Logan was as unafraid as Hild. It made his heart swell. Regular people were hard to gauge in regards to the lichen-infected. To willingly touch one, well, it was a rare thing. We explained that the reindeer are having to rest up before what Clint termed the long haul. He said that you were friends of the reindeer and that you didn't eat them. You're all vegetarian wolf deers. Which is good because one of the kids wanted to go home to get you dog food. You can thank me later, he said in a loud voice. He got many grateful yips. Anyway, you guys get to come in and mill around with the guests if you'd like. I think everyone who put this party together would appreciate the opportunity to say thank you for what you've done. After another affectionate scruff of Baxter's ears, Logan rose and beckoned the wolves to follow. Baxter braced for mayhem when they entered. They certainly got the continued wary looks from some of the parents. Others took it all in stride, resolved to simply accept this for what it was. A gift. Clint was in his element as the kids clamored for Santa's attention. A line formed for each child to speak to Santa in turn. Laughing and shrieking, and a lot of kids running in circles before parents could corral them. He was patient with each of the children and their long wish lists. Ricky really stepped up to the plate, playing up being one of the elves as he kept order. Things were moving smoothly for the party. It was controlled chaos. Baxter opted to stay in the corner, as far from the festivities as possible. Partly to stay out from underfoot, partly so none of the kids would come over. Kids being kids were more openly curious about them, judging by their looks of wonder. The rest of the wolf deer joined him in the corner, content to make a mess of the cake and pie brought over by those less intimidated by them. Logan disengaged from a group of residents and headed toward the community kitchen. Curious, Baxter followed and watched as Logan fixed a plate, piling it with cake and cookies and some of the other food brought for the occasion. He ripped off a piece of tinfoil and wrapped it before heading off down the hall. Baxter followed. Logan stopped in front of Puckerface's office. After looking around, he opted to place the plate on the floor and pulled out his wallet. He grinned at Baxter and waggled his eyebrows as he produced a credit card. "I learned from the best," he said. After a little jimmying, he got the office door open and crept in. Baxter waited in the hall to guard against witnesses. Logan wrote something and left the piece of paper on top of the plate before locking and shutting the door again. He noticed Baxter watching his every move and tilted his head. He's a tool, yes. But even he deserves a little Christmas cheer. That was more generous than Baxter was feeling at the moment. Baxter Lawson. Hild's voice echoed down the hall. They both turned to watch the elderly woman marching in their direction. She dropped to her knees and threw her arms around his neck. It sent his antlers flying off his head. "Logan told me what you were up to. I don't know how to thank you. You saved Christmas." Standing there awkwardly wrapped in Hild's arms, he rolled his eyes to look up. Logan removed his glasses to wipe at his eyes. He remained still until Hild was all hugged out and with Logan's help, rose to her feet again. "Make sure all the boys come over in the morning. I'll have enough pancakes for everyone, and I'll make my famous mixed berry topping. I'll even make homemade whipped cream." Cupping Logan's cheek, she pulled him down to kiss it. "You're welcome to come as well, Logan. Thank you for all you did tonight. Now back to the party, you two. The kids have made up a game, and they need all of Santa's wolves in attendance." Baxter sighed. "Games?" Logan tugged gently at his ear as if he read Baxter's mind. "You'll survive this one night. Come on." "I thought kids were supposed to be in bed by 9 or something," Baxter groused. Up to his elbows in suds, he washed the dishes that had piled up, while a few of the post-party cleanup crew started to separate out the containers for their owners. "Hild always made us go to bed at 9. Hild patted his waist as she reached around him to get a sponge to wipe the table. This was a special night for them. They were entitled to one night up past their bedtimes. Especially with as well-behaved as they all were. You, on the other hand, were nothing but trouble. Baxter snorted and handed a bowl to Logan for drying. "I was 17. My parents let me stay up as late as I wanted. The only requirement was that my grades didn't slip. If you tell me you were a straight-A student." "I was," Logan said in triumph. "I hate you." "No, you don't." "I do. You were going to make me be Santa." "Well, you saved yourself by bringing us a better Santa." Baxter dropped the sponge he was using into the water. "Are you saying I wouldn't make a good Santa?" Logan shook his head. "Oh no, you're not catching me in that trap. Besides, you made a better head wolf deer. The only thing missing was a red nose." "I looked. I couldn't find one." Dissolving into laughter, Logan scooped up some suds and flicked them at Baxter. "I don't know if I believe you or not. After all, you did buy those antlers." With no more dishes, Baxter drained the water and rinsed his hands before drying them off. "I'm going to go find a broom and sweep the floor. That should be the last of what we need to do." Logan nodded and set out the dried dishes for pickup. "I'll gather up the garbage and put it out in the bin with our abandoned tree." The last of the cleanup crew said their goodnights and headed off to their homes. Baxter swept up the last of the trash. Along the way, he inspected the chair and tables to make sure all traces of the garland were gone. He could just imagine Grumpass in the morning bitching about that one small piece of tinsel left behind. Slowly, the lights shut off deep within the building, leaving just the evening lights in the main hall. Logan appeared moments later. Everything is out, the building is locked up, and all we have to do is make sure the front door shuts behind us. It locks automatically. Baxter finished up what he was doing and met Logan at the front door. All in all, the night was a success. Christmas Eve was salvaged, no one went away disappointed. It was a good feeling to know he was part of something bigger. Even if it was for only a brief time. Logan paused, his hand hooking over Baxter's arm to stop him. Look up. A piece of mistletoe hung above them in the doorway. Before Baxter could take it down, Logan had him by the back of the neck. I've wanted to do this all night. He pulled down to touch Baxter's mouth, lips to lips. He stepped into Baxter, backing him up to collide with the door jamb. Logan's full weight pressed Baxter back, and he wrapped his arms around Baxter's waist. With an armful of Logan, it was easy to gather the other man close. This was what made it the best Christmas ever. When they parted, Baxter's heart pounded heavily in his chest. He was dizzy and feeling just a bit giddy. Here was this incredible man that he just met, and oddly enough, their connection felt real to him. Real as in real. Wanting to get to know him better, real. Logan knowing who Baxter was and still wanting to kiss him, real. Wanting to know more about Logan, real. The big things and the little things, real. He didn't think this was possible. Baxter's luck in the romance department was filled with disappointments. None of them had felt like this before. Maybe Clint was right. The holidays are all about romance. Epilogue. Baxter stuck his head in the door. Hild was nowhere to be seen, but the aroma of pancakes and bacon filled the house. Logan sat on the sofa with Xander and Ricky, channel surfing to look for a football game. Hey, he hissed softly to get Logan's attention. All three turned to look back at the door. Baxter? He shushed Logan, motioning for him to keep his voice down. Baxter, Logan said again in a lower voice. Where have you been? Hild's been asking about you, and Clint threatened to start opening gifts without you. With a shake of his head, he motioned for Logan to come outside. Of course, why did he think he'd get just Logan? Xander and Ricky came with him. It was just as well, since Baxter would need help unloading his package. I have something that I made last night for Aunt Hilde, and need help getting it set up. I thought you were going home to sleep, Logan said, his arms crossed over his chest. Something about being around kids sapped your will to live. I just said they made me tired, Baxter said. And I did go home. But at 2 a.m. I was wide awake again. So I got on the internet and started to research. I've been working on it ever since. Baxter motioned to the tarp thrown over something on a trailer behind his truck. I need help getting it on the lawn and set up. Logan dropped his pose and went over to lift up the corner of the tarp. He dropped it, looked at Xander and Ricky in disbelief, and then back to Baxter. You didn't. I did. Now help me get it off the trailer. There you are, Hild said when Baxter entered the house. Ricky was still laughing, and Xander immediately left the living room when Hild walked in, mumbling something about, when she kills you, I get your pancakes or something to that effect. Baxter felt right proud of what he'd done. He looked up the conversions and everything. If he could repair small engines, he could do math. It just took a little ingenuity, because there would be no do-overs. Aunt Hilde, I have a present for you for Christmas, but it's outside. Baxter started back to the door, then stopped. And you have to close your eyes. When he gets like this, I get suspicious, Hild said sotto voce to Logan. Logan nodded. And well, you should. She pulled back. You knew about this? Not until half an hour ago. She untied her apron and draped it over the sofa arm. Well, pancakes are almost done, so if we're going to do this, let's do it. Clint, keep an eye on the last batch. Yes, ma'am, Clint called from the kitchen. You have to close your eyes, Baxter said, not budging from the door. All right, Mr. Antsy Britches. Hild covered her eyes with her hands. But I can't see how to get out the door. Logan and Ricky guided Hild out onto the front porch. They placed her at the center and left room for the rest of Baxter's pack, Hild's boys, to cram in behind her. The moment they stepped out, they started to snicker. Jesus, Baxter. Language, Anderson. Sorry, Aunt Hilde. I'm worried now, she said to Logan. Logan silently laughed and lifted his chin to Baxter. Go on, Baxter. The pancakes will get cold. After fussing with the tarp, Baxter stood to one side and grabbed a corner. Okay, you can look. Hild took a breath, dropped her hands and opened her eyes. You brought me a plastic bed sheet. With a wide grin, Baxter flipped it off to uncover his kinetic sand snowman. She stood there gape-mouthed. Magnolia branches for arms, 2 lumps of coal for eyes, but one is a bit gray because they were the only lumps of coal I had in my barbecue that weren't crumbly, and a tennis ball for a nose because I didn't have a carrot. He moved around the snow/sandman to show off its features. I was going to put gloves on him, but I don't remember where I put mine. Her eyes squinted. Is that sand from the coast? Yes, it is, Baxter said proudly. I drove to the beach specifically to get the white sand. Most kinetic sand I saw on the internet was brown because they used playground sand. A brown snowman wouldn't do. It's not a snowman at all, Jared said. Right. Baxter crowed. But it's as good as one. It won't melt in the sun. But then she'll have a pile of white sand in the middle of her lawn when the sand dries out. Jared had a point there. Baxter crossed his arms while he thought about that. We can keep him watered. Like a plant. Clint stepped out on the porch. Pancakes are done, good God, what is that? Hild doubled over, her hands on her knees. Baxter stared at her, startled. Was she okay? Her hand flailed out to grab Logan's arm, and when she rose again, tears streamed down her face. She was laughing so hard her face was red. My goodness, Baxter, she said through gasps of breath. With a wave, she motioned him over. When he was within reach, she grabbed him and hugged him tightly. With you in my life, there is never a dull moment. Her voice was muffled against his chest. Thank you, my dear. Baxter held her in a tight hug. I love you, Hild. I love you, Baxter. I love all of you boys, she said, her voice watery. She beckoned for them to gather close for a hug. You too, Logan. You're a part of this, now. Baxter made room in the circle for Logan to tuck under one arm. The man's warmth pressed against his side. A deep comfort settled over Baxter as they looked at each other. Logan's eyes were filled with tears. Something shifted deep in Baxter's chest, something that had held on to the tight knot as a defense mechanism. For a moment, it was just a little easier to breathe. Logan shook his head at Baxter. You're something else, Baxter Lawson. They stood there in the early morning silence. While they held each other, dry eyes weren't so dry anymore. Except Baxter's. It was the morning sun making his eyes water. He conceded to one thing. Maybe Christmas wasn't so bad.